Thank you very much for your patience, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and all participants. I hope you enjoyed the Jeju for 3 days. And my name is Chang Seon-young, and I'm your MC for this event. Now, today is the last day of this event, and in this session, it's time to wrap up the 2021 Jeju Forum. This closing session will be held with the title of Towards Universal Model of Reconciliation, Peace, and Healing from Jeju to the World. So first, we have a welcome speech. I would like to invite Dr. Jacques Attali, first president of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. He's attending this forum in a quite special way with telepresence hologram. So utilizing this hologram, he will deliver his message as if he's attending here on site in person. So actually we had a chance to use this amazing technical system with former President Francois Hollande of France. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a big round of applause.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be with you, and it's an honor to be back to Jeju Island, which is a very important place in the world because it's one of the most important places to deal with the challenges of peace and healing after terrible and devastating events. Of course, now this part of the world is at peace, as well as the rest of the world, at least on peace in terms of hot wars. But there are some wars which are going underground, such as wars which are going in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, which are terrible with a lot of people dying, famine, women raped, and terrible circumstances. Therefore, there is a huge amount of awareness which is needed for a request for peace everywhere in the world, to be aware of the danger and to take part of the necessity to feel and create a world where peace will be a precondition for everything. If we want to have peace, we need to have growth, we need to have economic development, we need to have social development, we need to have democracy, we need to think about the future of next generations, we need to create a positive world which is good for our children and grandchildren, but the condition for peace. There is no peace without future, without challenges, projects, possibility to becoming yourself and create the condition for the coexistence of people, civilizations, and a different way of looking at the future. The Jeju event is a good place to think about it. Peace is always at stake, never finalized. It will always be a challenge. And now with the development of new weapons, as we have seen and as we are seeing, the dangers are more than ever. Therefore, we need to move on to keep awakeness. And thank you very much for Jeju for that event.
Please give another big round of applause. Thank you very much for your wonderful speech. Actually, I felt like he's here. Thank you so much. And now, please allow me to introduce Minister Jeon Hae-chul from Ministry of the Interior and Safety to deliver his welcome speech. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's all have a look.
안녕하십니까. 행정안전부 장.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Minister Jeon Hae-chul of the Interior and Safety. The 16th Jeju Forum for Sustainable Peace and Inclusive Prosperity is a conduit to share our experience of overcoming the Jeju 4-3 with the world, which is very meaningful and significant. I am very grateful of Governor Won Hee-ryong, Professor Bang Myung-lim, and Chairman Yang Jo-hoon of Jeju 4-3 Peace Foundation for organizing this special event. As we all know, although Jeju 4-3 is a tragedy of our history, it has worked for the value of life and human rights, as well as peace and coexistence, which is a solemnly resonating model for recovering from sufferings. Victims and the bereaved families have been tolerating the painful times and making devotion to find wide solutions to the incident and the participation and devotion of every single person laid foundation for reconciliation and coexistence, overcoming the tragedy. The 4-3 spirit is to be shared and emphasized in the world as it is in line with the universal value of unity. Not only through the sessions today, but through more of such opportunities, I hope the significance and values of the 4-3 spirit is shared with the international community more broadly. I have to mention that the first day of this forum, June 24th, was special as Jeju 4-3 special law was enforced after fully revised for the first time in 20 years of its legislation. Reinstatement of the prisoners and reparation for the victims are now possible with the institutional ground, so I look forward to a bigger stride being made to address the Jeju 4-3. The Ministry of Interior and Safety is a leading responsibility to support Jeju 4-3. I will make sure all measures pursuant to the revised law are implemented without problems. In closing, I wish for your health and success. Thank you.
And once again, thank you very much, Minister, for your meaningful speech. Thank you very much. And now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a speech and discussion. So before the discussion, our panelists and moderator, could you please come up to the stage now? 네, 차장님 그리고 패널분들 단상으로 먼저 모시겠습니다. Could you please come up to the stage? Thank you very much. Please take your seats. Thank you very much. And now I would like to introduce our panelists and moderator for our discussion and speech on site. Firstly, we have Professor Bang Myung-nim of Yonsei University as a moderator. Please welcome him. And also, Governor Won Hee-ryong of Jeju Special Self-Governing Province. Please welcome him with a warm hand. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Chairperson Yang Jo-hoon of Jeju Sasan Peace Foundation. Please welcome him. Thank you very much. And let us begin the discussion and speech with our keynote speech from Professor Bang Myung-nim, and he's also our moderator for this session. So, please. Okay. Please welcome him.
네, 감사합니다.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for the introduction. I am Park Myung-rim, professor of Yonsei University. I'm so honored to be here at the 2021 Jeju Forum. This is the closing session, and we are having this closing session under the topic of Jeju, April 3rd incident. That's so meaningful, and I'm so honored to be moderating and making presentation about this. So we have celebrated the 70th anniversary of Korean War, and we have donated 3 million pieces of mask to the world to protect people from the pandemic. And we could see how Korea has evolved in terms of the civilization and technology over the past 7 years. Of course, in various home appliances and automobiles and shipbuilding, Korea is showing the world the cutting-edge technology. We had the president at the Ulti event and made a statement, and that was so meaningful as well. Yesterday and the day before and today, I could also feel the pride of Korea. We have had the Korean War, and in the past we had Oostburg that had the suffering of the war but has recovered. And at the time, in the past, we also had Perdong, which had so many people being killed. And along with those two countries, actually, here in Jeju Island, we also have the spot of massacre occurring in Jeju, and Jeju is assigned as an island of peace, and that is really meaningful, and we can take pride in that. Well, Korea's semiconductor is like the standard for the world, and just like that, I hope that the reconciliation, healing, and peace can also be modeled by Korea. I have been studying and doing research on April 3rd incident and have done many studies on Jeju, and I think that Jeju can be like a model for the reconciliation, peace, and healing. So how can I operate this? Yes. So whether we can contain universal peace on this island, we can look at this slide. We had Jeju of 1948 and 1949 and of 2018 and 2019. We had massacre, accusation, and violence here, but now we have justice, truth, and reconciliation. We are finding ways to make ease with each other and become a world citizen. So this is a map of this island. So in Pyoseon and Jungmun, we had 570 civilians and more than 400 civilians being killed in those areas. So there was no single village that had no victims. But now, in 2018 and 19, here you can see Governor Won Hee-ryong and Chairperson Yang Jo-hoon to talk about the massacre and the tragedy of Jeju at United Nations. So this was a United Nations event hosted by the civil society, and actually the venue was fully packed. There was no chair left, so people were sitting on the floor and even sitting outside the room just at the alley to listen to the presentation. I am trying to go to the next slide, but it's not working. Can somebody help me to go to the next slide? So 70 years ago, we had such a tragedy here on the island of Jeju, but now we have made the reconciliation. And what's the meaning of that? We have forgiven and we have had the internal peace, and that has expanded to the local peace and regional peace and social peace. In terms of in the academic sense, the internal peace is now expanded to external peace, and the local peace is expanded to global peace. So I think that we can now have the holy site of peace on the Korean Peninsula, especially on this island of Jeju. To understand that, I think we have to first look into this slide. What is the UN peace and its relations with the April 3rd incident? Well, during the First World War, we used the term global war or world war. And that was the same. We used the same term for the Second World War. So it was a pan-global war. So we had the Cold War after that, but even after the Cold War or even during the Cold War, we always had some violence and disruption. So we can say that the capitalism and dictatorship or authoritarianism and the communism and capitalism were always in conflict. And the impact of those conflicts were felt the most in the Third World, like we had in Jeju Island. If there were no conflict between USSR and the US, do you think we would have had the April 3rd incident here in Jeju? I don't think so. So that kind of incident led to disruption of families in Jeju and also divided people between life and death. Still, well, there are other countries here. I have listed 11 other examples. So there were 11 countries where the coalition forces had occupied and they had a divided occupation. So internally, they had integration or fragmentation, division, and unification. So some of these countries had even fiercer conflicts than Korea, but after the Second World War, they had unification or consolidation. But in case of Jeju, we didn't have that. April 3rd, I think it's like aporia. So it's not like you cannot just bear the pain by living, but it's not like you can choose to die. That is what happened here in Jeju on April 3rd. We all understand that by reading many articles and research papers. So after the April 3rd incident, we had a continuum of aporia here. But I believe that the values of April 3rd Jeju incident is greater than what we wanted to, what we desired here, because there were many movements and efforts made in Jeju. So people of Jeju had that kind of recognition and awakening and discourse, started to pursue ways to regain the paradise lost. So they were arguing that they were not communists, they are not riots or rebellions, but just it was a struggle. And since 1990s, we started to find truth and reconciliation and coexistence. And we found the model that is even more developed than the case of the South Africa. And we have Professor Moon Jung-in and all the leading scholars who pursue the project of making Jeju the island of peace. And we pursued autonomy, peace, and human rights. And on the 70th year, we started to pursue the healing, reconciliation, peace, justice. And as I showed you the picture from UN, we started to broadcast the model of Jeju as the global universal model for peace and started to share it with the world. If you look at the process of resolution, you can see that we have transcended the ideological fight. So you can here see 2 liberal administration and 3 conservative administration. And Kim Dae-jung administration and Roh Moo-hyun administration, they made big strides towards the resolution of the issues of the Jeju 4-3 incident. And the opposition party, when they took the office, they did not annul those efforts, but led on continuing the effort. So President Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye, they kept on working on that and they made additional efforts on top of that. Simply put, we can say that the essence of Jeju paradigm and the Jeju model is like democratization of the nation and the grassroots 4-3 movement, creating justice and the civil initiative. And the most important model of 4-3 is the mutual governance and private-public cooperation. And I think that is very significant. We are doing the study on this topic, and we have done the reconciliation with the bereaved families of the victims. And that kind of coalition model of overcoming the past tragedy is not existing anywhere around the world. So in case of the North Ireland case and other cases, we have seen the disbursement of the peace model. However, we are having consistency and continuum in the Jeju model. It is one of the leading models, and Kim Dae-jung and Kim Jong-pil, they had a coalition in the Korean government in the past. And I think the same thing is happening on the island. It is rather moderate, right, and liberal politics that we are having here. So Governor Won Hee-ryong was assigned as the governor, and we also have the head of the bereaved families group appointed as the mayor of Jeju City. So that kind of coalition is such a great example that can be like a model for the whole world. So in terms of this spirit, well, we talk about justice or forgiveness, because if you try to pursue forgiveness, then it's hard to get justice, and the other way around. But in case of Jeju, we are having both justice and forgiveness. And what is missing here was the punishment of penetrators, but actually it happened very long time ago, so that couldn't happen. But we had the head of the state, head of the government, making the apology officially. So we can say that the frame of the Jeju model is so solid, and there is the revision of the special act being pursued by the Moon administration. And with that, I think that we can pursue the true creation of the community that seeks the compensation, reconciliation, and healing.
적인 접근을 했거나
If we had the legal approach or a talio or just a superficial healing or reconciliation, well, they were not very successful. You can see that from those cases. And they just stopped at very small village level, as you can see from the case of the Cambodia. Of course, we had those village level approaches from Jeju as well, but it didn't stop there. So these are some global model from Killing Field, Rwanda, and Hatsatsa trial being held.
This is Youngmo. Whenever I visit, I come to Jeju Island, I go to and I pay tribute here. I study and cover the Youngmo one very much, and I found very surprising things because they are not existing in other countries. Colonial fighters, patriots, and the victims of Jeju forgery are laid here. And this poem is very impressively inscribed. All should be forgiven, and all the alive come here and lower your heads. The social deaths are aggregated here. So there's a patriotism matter, and sacrifices are not different in the other world. Then why not? It would be possible in this reality. That is the Jeju spirit and Youngmoan spirit and Hagi spirit. This is very, very classified secret information. When the Youngmo one was created, can you count how many are there? When the names are listed, people were engaged in dialogue after dialogue to remove any opposition to the list of the people to be laid in Youngmo 1. This is very precious record of the superintendent of Yungmo-won. This is the drawings of the person who already have passed away, who is related to the Yungmo-won. The 4-3 Victims Association and Jeju Veteran Police Association held hands and they paid a tribute together. They laid flowers together. So joint activities were done between the two opposing forces. Now we see that how surprising it is to joint paying tribute. The person who killed his father came together here to Jeju. So the aggressors and the victim came down to Jeju together. In closing, 4-3 is the frontier and boundary. The civilization, imperialism, and power were confronted and collided. If we can make a peace, then we can export reconciliation to the offenders. So we can be the actors of reconciliation. In that sense, as Jeju people was victim of a global war, but they can be the leading agent for the reconciliation at the global level, from the finding truth to memorialization, education. Jeju got the highest score, unlike other countries like Rwanda, Israel, Palestine. In particularly, Israel, Palestine, even though there are many peace treaties, but their scores are very low. Cambodia, they pursued oblivion and judicial justice, but their scores is not very fluctuating. Argentina seems to be very good, but fall short of Jeju scores. South Africa, with the country comparison study, and as a result of study, but they have lower scores than Jeju, Spain, Colombia, Poland, all the same. In closing, Chiron was wounded by Hercules. He himself healed himself. He became a doctor himself. Plato said, who is the best doctor? The answer was a doctor who was wounded the most will be the best doctor. And that is captured in literature. And Jung also took that story into the psychoanalysis. And the Baeknok lake at the top of the Hala mountain signify the unity would save us as healers and the peacemakers. I'm sorry for the extended presentation. Thank you.
예, 그
So this is the end of my presentation. So should I proceed as a moderator? Yes. So I have witnessed 4-3. I have done studies about 4-3. And we have main players here who have played a critical role in resolving this issue. First, we have Governor Won Hee-ryung.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Before the closing, we are in the last session of Jeju Forum. We are in the toward the universal model of reconciliation, peace, and healing from Jeju to the world. That is topic of our closing session. So this title emphasized that the Jeju become the symbol of peace, and that was the gist of the Professor Bang Myung-lim's presentation. As you know very well, Professor Bang Myung-lim began his study as an expert of Korean War, and he captured the topic of Jeju 4-3, and he is an expert in this incident. He toured and traveled around the villages in Jeju. He met with the bereaved families and victim families of Jeju Fortress. He collected testimonials from them in a casual way. He listened to them. He was a real, genuine researcher. And in order to heal the pains of Jeju Fortress, he proposed a variety of models. So his journey continued across all the governments. He proposed the bills, and he made the criticism and proposed the great models. So he is the most powerful and excellent advocate for Jeju Fortress incident. In that regard, I'm very grateful of Professor Bang Myung-nim for the keynote presentation in this closing session. As a universal model, he proposed the Jeju-based model. And he studied other countries which went through the massacre and genocide. And he found the significance and meaning from the Jeju Fortress in crafting the model. I believe that is a great support and lesson for all of us on behalf of the Jeju people. And I will pursue to find a peace with this incident. From March 1st in 1943, the Jeju Fortress incident started, and that incident was collision between the state ideology and the civilians. So many casualties were produced in this tragedy. Civilian massacre cannot be justified even in a war. That was the extreme crimes to be committed on civilian human rights. At that time, Jeju people saw their communities and families destructed, and offenders and the victims were divided, and they suffered the most in that division. They went through enormous pains. However, Jeju people try to overcome Jeju Fortress pains with reconciliation and forgiveness. Now, Jeju Fortress signifies the human rights and reconciliation. That is the value of Jeju Island and the contribute to development of Jeju history. January 12, 2000, the Jeju Special Act was enforced. Since then, a lot of reports were adopted, and presidential announcement and apologies were made, and Jeju was designated as a peaceful island of peace. And another special act has been passed in the National Assembly. Behind all these activities was Professor Park, as he pointed out. The civil society's activities and bereaved families' efforts were the driving force for all these activities. And Kim Dae-jung administration began the reinstatement and the fact-finding, truth-finding activities. And those government activities played a big role. And unlike them, actually, the conservative governments also were on the same journey. And the Veteran Police Association was also part of this effort. So in that regard, Jeju Fortress process was another model. Rather than the movement is going toward the struggle, but all the stakeholders joined together and make apology, forgive each other, and found lessons, and pass down those lessons to the next generation. In that regard, the efforts were very impressive and would work as a historic model for reconciliation and coexistence. The last two decades has been a long time for the Jeju people. January this year, the National Assembly passed the revised law of Special Act on Jeju 4.3. So additional fact-finding activities and problematic trials would be on the table again. And most importantly, reparation and the compensations are clearly stated in the revised law. So that will be the legal basis for the 70-year-old wound. So we went over one hump in our journey. Not only Jeju 4.3, there are a lot of incidents in our history. During the Jeju 4.3 incident, there were people who refused to attack. And another similar case is the Yeosu Suncheon incident, 228 Masan, Burma Democratic Struggle, June 18th Gwangju Democratization Movement. These are the examples that the people rose to protect human rights and democratic values against the autocratic government. All these struggles take a lesson from the Jeju 4.3, and all these incidents also should be the subject of solution finding, and the Ministry of the Interior and Safety would take the lead in this endeavor. Among other things, Jeju 4.3 overcame all the difficulties to present a universal reconciliation and coexistence. In that regard, it presents lessons for the country. And so I can say that we Jeju people should be proud of our achievement. Distinguished guests and dear Jeju citizens, now we have to reinstate the reputation of the victims and the victims of the incident, and we should turn Jeju 4.3 incident as a symbol of peace and coexistence, and it should be the driving force to open peace and prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. For a lot of tasks to be tackled, as a governor, our government will not stop efforts to address all those issues and problems. State power and ideological framework should be broken to realize peace and coexistence. Likewise, we have to rise to the challenges ahead of us, and the social conflict and confrontations, those will be the target to apply Jeju 4.3 spirit. So by overcoming those difficulties as well as COVID crisis, I hope we all rise and become one to move beyond the challenges ahead of us. That is how we pay respect to those victims of Jeju 4.3 people. Resilience and sacrifice and the spirit should be nationalized, regionalized, and globalized. In that endeavor, I would like to urge all the people to be part of that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor, for your touching remarks. You have talked about the meaning and task of the 4.3 incident and how it can be utilized as a stimulus to have the reconciliation and healing of the peninsula. So that was such a meaningful remark. Thank you. Now we will have Yang Jo-hoon, who is the chairperson of the Jeju April 3rd Peace Foundation. Chairperson, please. Yes, I am chairperson of the Jeju 4.3 Peace Foundation, Yang Jo-hoon. On August 15th, 1945, we enjoyed the liberalization from the Japanese occupation. Yet that day is also a painful day where the 38th parallel drawn by the US and the USSR forces were marked. And that demarcation is still left as a great pain for the people of Korea even after all those years. I think that the beginning of April 3rd is from that 38th parallel. And the people of Jeju, we wanted to erase that line, and that is why they had to go through that kind of suffering. So although 4/3 happened on this island, we can say that this is the result of the national division and the Cold War. What are the values of the 4/3? What are the spirits of the 4/3? Well, to those questions, I want to answer with 6 points. First, it is about the autonomy and freedom. Second, justice. Third, unification. Fourth, peace and human rights. And fifth is reconciliation and coexistence. And the last is healing and integration. We in Halla, the people of Jeju, have the long tradition of being independent. We didn't want to be interfered by external forces, and as a community, we had strong consolidation. Right after the liberalization in the free community, the level of education of the people of Jeju was the highest in Korea. So the young people with great education, they formed the People's Committee and all the other autonomous communities and organizations. They were very active in that. But the oppression of the US occupation started, and that shook the root of that autonomy. On the March 1st of 1947, there was the firing by the police, and in all means, that was the wrongful firing. So that's why there was the strike by the public and private sector altogether. And after that joint strike, we had the big wind of Great Massacre. We had 2,500 citizens of Jeju being arrested, and they did torture on those people. And that is why the people of Jeju resisted. And that kind of resistance should be reevaluated as a will for justice and independence and autonomy. The armed protest of April 3rd, of course, it was protest against the occupation of the US force, but also it is related to the unification movement. So if we do have the unified peninsula in the future, I think that we will have even higher evaluation of the 4/3. And during the healing process of the 4/3, I think we had the great experience of overcoming different ideology. I think that can serve as a great example for the whole world. Some people say, why is 4/3 a symbol of human rights? But I can say that 4/3 incident is a case where the U.S. occupation force trying to take the control led to the autonomy movement or the unification movement by the citizens, and that is very meaningful. So there is the 4/3 freedom spirit and the normalization of relations with the neighboring countries. But I think that what is really meaningful is that we had a true meaning of reconciliation and healing in the process of resolving the 4/3. And Hage incident or Hage case is great example of what we did to resolve this April 3rd. So there were victims of different places in Jeju, and we have put their souls together to have the joint commemoration service. In 2013, the bereaved family of the 4/3 incident and the Association of the Police of Jeju, they had the meeting together and consoled each other. That is unprecedented because it's like going over forgiveness and reconciliation. And since then, every year they are visiting the commemoration hall and the Jeju Peace Park together. When I look at those efforts, I think Jeju has integrated the left and the right, private and the public, and conservative and liberal together in its effort to resolve the pain of April 3rd. Since last year, we have the 4/3 Traumatic Center being operated, test operated actually. And we are not stopping there. With the revision of the 4/3 Special Act, we will take more actions for compensation and redress of the victims of the 4/3 incident. And it is like the government taking the least courtesy for those victims, and that can also be interpreted as a process of healing. So 4/3 was at the forefront of ideological conflict, and Jeju has overcome that and is coming together and being united. So Yomiuri newspaper of Japan said that for 100 years of the 20th century, there were 100 major incidents that happened during that 100 years, and Jeju 4/3 was included in there because it is a small land of Jeju, but 300,000 people were killed, and this kind of incident was not known even amongst Korean people due to the concealment. So over 50 years, we have been hiding this incident. The people of Korea did not know about this incident, but in 2000, with the enactment of the Special Act on Jeju 4/3 incident, this buried fact was unveiled. In last February, with the full revision of the 4/3 Special Act, the tricky issue of compensation and redress can now be resolved with this new foundation. With those solutions, I believe that now 4/3 can serve as a global exemplary model for resolution of conflict and truthful fact-finding. And for that, I want to ask for the gathering of your wisdom. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Jakatali made the congratulatory remarks in the beginning. He said, without peace, there is no future. And he pointed out that Jeju would be the prime example of that statement. Through Jejuporam, many got to know of Jeju 4/3 incident. And now Jeju is known to the world. So Mr. Jakatali came to mention Jeju. Now I would like to invite another speaker. Our peace is never late, never early, but we can say that our peace efforts have been very much matured in comparison with the German case. Mr. Bernapeni, he delivered his own pre-recorded message.
Distinguished participants of the Jeju Forum, 안녕하세요. Greetings from Berlin, Germany. And thank you very much for giving me the chance to say something about the experience of reconciliation in Germany, headed under the question, is time healing all wounds? In 1918, after the First World War, the emperor went into exile and Germany was in ruins. The emperor went away, but the elite was still in Germany. The elite in society, in finance, in politics, in administration, and in the military. There was a mood of revenge, not a mood for reconciliation. After the First World War, we would have needed reconciliation badly in Germany, but there was no chance to accomplish this. And then, 1945, end of the Second World War. The dictator Hitler had committed suicide. Germany laid in ruins, and the atrocities committed by Germany were so obvious that reconciliation was almost unavoidable, and it was aided by the four main powers. And in that case, it worked relatively well. The third attempt came after unification. In 1990, Germany was formally unified, and we had interesting developments on the international and the national level. We had a substitute of peace treaty with the four main powers, Great Britain, France, the United States, and the Soviet Union, the so-called two Germanys, 2+4 arrangement. And on the national level, there was a negotiated joining of East Germany. East Germany became member of the Federal Republic of West Germany. And of course, there was need for reconciliation. The East German state was called the Second German Dictatorship. And in that case, it was rather successful. But even more than 30 years after unification, the process is still ongoing. We still have big differences between East and West in Germany. Touching on that topic, one of course is tempted to ask, will there be reconciliation after unification in Korea? And will it be possible? The fourth attempt is still an ongoing one. It has something to do with the German colonial past. In the center of Berlin was the Imperial Palace. That palace was damaged during the Second World War and was blown up after the end of the Second World War, because East German authorities thought it was a symbol of the feudal past of Germany, so let's get away with it. Then we had a long discussion, a new building or rebuilding of the palace. The palace was rebuilt. It's a copy now in the center of Berlin, but the question is what to do with that copy. And the idea was, we'll make a Humboldt Forum, named after two famous brothers of Germany, and use it as a place for seminars, for trainings, for exhibitions with pieces taken from various museums. Fine idea, but the execution of that idea was very clumsily done. It was not really that thoughtful as it should have been, because surprise, surprise, many of the pieces of art that were meant to be put on display were taken from former colonies. They were stolen from former colonies. And that really started a vehement discussion beginning in 2020, and it's still ongoing. And that comes together with efforts to reflect about the German colonial past, especially in one colony, which was called German Southwest Africa, a country that's now known by the name of Namibia. The famous Albert Einstein told us time is relevant. And as far as reconciliation is concerned, many people think, now, time has come. Other people will say, no, let's wait. Time has not yet come. Or more time is still needed. And there is the opinion, since so much time has elapsed already, reconciliation is no longer necessary, respectably will not be possible. The past should be put to rest. Experiences we have made in Germany suggest that indeed time is needed, and in most cases a new generation, a new political system, a new political mood within society can facilitate reconciliation. It can be postponed, but it certainly cannot be avoided indefinitely. Legal, political, moral, and ethical aspects need to be considered equally. Reconciliation needs time to take roots in society, otherwise it will not last, it will not succeed. Presently, if it's not yet time for reconciliation, it definitely is time for cooperation. And there needs to be fair and comprehensive cooperation. Thank you very much. 감사합니다.
교수님
Thank you, Professor Penny Hing. You have such an in-depth understanding of Jeju, and during the speech, he talked about the concept of Einstein. Well, physically, time can be long for some people and it can be short for some people. It can be like a straight line for some people and can be like a curved line for the others. But for the history of the humanity, the time can be like a silence for some, and for the others it can be like a turmoil. For some it can be like death, and for the others it can be the life. So if reconciliation is difficult, Professor Fanning said that we at least need to have a comprehensive cooperation. So in this relative concept of time, I believe that those who went through those time of death and turmoil should be led to this peaceful and silent lifetime. So we heard from Governor Won Hee-ryong and Chairperson Yang Jo-hoon, and I have some questions, tricky questions to the two panelists. So personally, what are the meanings of 4-3 to you, and where do you think 4-3 is standing currently? So in your life, what was the meaning of 4-3 and where does it stand now? I'm asking this question because I want to know what are the remaining tasks or works to be done for 4-3 in the future. So, Chairman, you can go first. For me, I can say that 4-3 is like a destiny. About 30 years ago, well, I didn't know anything about 4-3, and I was appointed as the head of the 4-3 fact-finding council and started my journey on this history. When we look back, the souls of 4-3 must have led me to that path. To add on that, the reconciliation, as Professor Fanning said, it's not easy. When we try to have the reconciliation movement, some say that the penetrators are not apologizing. How can we have the reconciliation? However, when we are trying to understand 4-3 structurally, when we are trying to interpret the meaning structurally, it was not done by one single commander or one police person. It was by someone on the top of the leadership who can be held accountable for this 4-3 incident. So, of course, the reconciliation was not easy. If I can just say it roughly, then we can say that 4-3 is like we are like the shrimp who had their backs broken due to the fight between whales. So I used this term a lot when I was talking about the 4-3 incident. If you look into the 4-3 incident with microscope, it's so hard to resolve it. There were so many small incidents that happened at village levels, but we have to have a broader perspective from a bigger view, and that will give us the light and possibility for reconciliation. So, of course, it's very difficult, but the reconciliation movement in Jeju is seeing some fruit. And this is garnering a lot of interest from scholars in and outside of the island.
네. 지사님.
Governor, please. Jeju 4-3 took place in the process of the statehood was established in the south and the north. It touched the question of a relationship of people and the land. It was very deep question. State power have to justify its power, and all the armored forces are to be destined to be destroyed in the process. In Korea, all the opposing powers to the government were crushed. And in the northern part of the division line, the Soviet occupation and the Kim Il-sung regime were in the making. Those who were opposing forces were destroyed, and that was ended up in Korean War ultimately. After World War II, the world has been divided by the ideological line, and Korea was at the front line. And as a result, the Korean peninsula was divided. It was our national tragedy. At that time, we have some options. There were political options. The fact that there were political options is related to the tragedy, and that tragedy has to be overcome to see the universal values. Actually, the civilians did not take any choice in the ocean. So the brutal violence were applied to the people who did not make any decision in the process. So this incident should be overcome. That is the goal of our peace effort. Even though we are at war, there were people who did not make any decision which side they should take. They were supposed to be protected. I believe that is a lesson, great lesson from the Jeju 43 incident. We have to declare that lesson, and the lesson has to be translated into action and practice. Personally, my father's siblings and my cousin siblings sacrificed. My father's brother was missing, and other female family members were sacrificed and they were commemorated. Do you know how old they were? My cousin brother was 7 years old, and my cousin sister was 5 years old. At that time, they were so young. They were kids. They didn't know what the leaflet was reading. They were exposed to the bare violence and they were killed. So the ideological line should be overcome, and thus the confrontation between between the source and those has to be overcome. Jeju 43 is really a tragedy. In fact, and all the violence and brutality taking place in the world should be overcome. It is not because Jeju 43 is a big incident to be universal, but it is meaningful because those incidents or tragedy can happen any corners of the world. So how to find the solution to this incident will be related to the human dignity and universal value. In finding the solution, the solution should be grounded on the common understanding of humanity. We as a people, we as a human beings should understand the limitation as a living being. That understanding is universal. In that regard, Jeju 43 is still continuing. So with the universal values and philosophy should be brought in to shine the lessons of the Jeju 43. Thank you.
그
So I think I have asked the right question. Actually, I didn't prepare it in advance, but one panel said that it was like a destiny for him, and we heard the other panel saying that it is related to the dignity of humankind. So I always think that we always should have warmth, embrace, and healing. And during that process, I think that we have the spiritual and mindful embrace of each other. So I'm doing a lot of studies on this 4-3 incident. And when I was doing that, I felt this warmth and embrace by the people, and I could see that both of you agree with that. But we should not be exaggerating. 4-3 still has a lot of work to be done. So at the current state, objectively, if there are any additional tasks that the 4-3 incident has to pursue, like the community of the Korea or the government or to the international society, anything you need to do additionally for the 4-3 incident? So when we trace back to the March 1st of 1947 and the 4-3 of 1948, we have the U.S. occupation. There was the transition from the U.S. force to the local police, but I can say that it is not. I'm not trying to say that we have to have like an anti-American movement or etc. But we have to have this proper interpretation of what really happened. So we have to understand that the U.S. occupation force had some part that was being played at the time. So we have to look back on that objectively. And at the time, we had the innocent victims who were jailed into prisons all around the South Korea, and they were killed while we had the opening up of those prisons at the outbreak of the Korean War, and they are buried in some unknown places of Korea. So we have to excavate their remains and do additional fact finding. So, and it's not just about the past and the present. For the future generation, we have to go beyond the ideological framework of being an uprising or a democratic movement or a liberalization movement, but rather we should have more mature spirit as a humanity so that we can have a better future for the upcoming generation. So we have to advance this 4-3 incident to evolve it. It would not be just ideological fight for the next generation to understand it properly.
이사장님,
It was very important message. Any further tasks? The generational passing down is very important. We should not miss that. The history and truth should be communicated to the generations to come. In reality, actually, to the Korean people and to the people of the world, Jeju is not widely known. So we have to let it known to the world. Rather than dealing with Jeju 3 only, we have to also deliver how Jeju people had overcome the incident and how they move toward the future. Historical arrangement is another task. We should not hurry with that task, but we have to take it step by step. So proper name should be given to the Jeju 3.
두 분 다
So we could hear from the two panelists here what kind of implications this 4-3 incident can have for the next generation and what we need to do for the next generation. We talk about healing and reconciliation, and the history is not about emotion. As we could see, the history is a cold, objective fact. And we have to face the reality and face the casualty that had occurred. So sometimes we might need to struggle. Sometimes we might need to have discourse. And now we will have the closing remarks by the Minister of Interior Safety, Jeon Hae-chul. He gave us the opening remarks, but now we will hear the closing remarks from Minister Jeon Hae-chul. And after that, we will hear from Governor Won Hee-ryong and Chairman Yang Jo-hoon what you plan to do in the future for the 4-3 incident from now on. So let's invite Minister Chun Hee-chul. Thank you all for participating in the panel discussion. As we have witnessed through the G7 summit participated by President Moon Jae-in, Korea is a world leader for economy and COVID-19 quarantine. Last year, amid the global pandemic, Korea shared the face mask with the world, garnering gratitude and praise from the world. Through a long enduring efforts of the Korean people, we have evolved from being a small power to a middle-income country, and now we are standing at the threshold of becoming an advanced country and a leading country. We deserve to be proud and confident. Today, all around the world, you can find Korean steel, petrochemical products, automobile, ship, and smartphone. For Korea's semiconductor, LCD TV, and all the other cutting-edge technology products, they are becoming global standards. We are one of the 11 leading democratic nations and is leading the world in values such as democracy, human rights, and health, international responsibility as well. And I want to add one more thing here, that is reconciliation and healing. Now, in terms of overcoming the past history, we are also setting a global model for clarification of the truth, regaining of honors for victims, apology by the government, compensation and redress, commemoration and remembrance. We are showing the reconciliation and coexistence, and that is between the central government and the local government, liberal and the conservative, victims and perpetrators, and Jeju 4-3 is leading that endeavor. We will further put our efforts together to be a global model and be a leader in overcoming the past history. As a minister, I will not forget that we should put our utmost efforts and interest on this issue. Once again, I want to extend my gratitude to the Jeju Forum for making it possible. So I heard the commitment by Minister Chun Hee-chul to keep his interest on this issue, and I think that is like a promise to the people of Jeju. And through the amendment of the special act, we will find better foundation to take legal actions or compensation and regaining of honor for the victims or their bereaved families. So this would be almost the end of the session, but I want to ask the two panelists here who have worked very hard from the public and private sector and from Seoul and in Jeju. I want to hear what are your plans to advance or lead this Jeju 4-3 incident from now on. Any commitment or promise you want to make?
Our task was how to implement the revised 4-3 Special Act, the reinstatement of the prisoners, and additional fact-finding should be conducted without any glitch, and I will add my efforts to that. As a person who experienced Jeju 4-3, not only me, but also the junior researchers or students who study Jeju 4-3 should be carried out. So additional research should be carried out. Thank you.
So the national government authority should not cause any unjust suffering to the people. And even when they do, there aren't many governments who apologize about it and compensate the victims for that. And I think that the government who does that is not causing shame on itself, but rather like setting the dignity for itself and setting the right path for the future. And that is why we can say that this 4-3 progress is showing the greatness of Korea. And that is why this is the evidence of the greatness of the people of Jeju and also of Korea. And I want to keep on that meaning. And I will always be at the forefront of future progress in this matter. Thank you.
말씀 너무 감사.
Thank you for your last words. As I begin the session as an ordinary citizen, I mentioned two things in the session. Many thousands years ago, our ancestors said that you will build the castle of spirit and reconciliation on the land of tragedy. We went through great tragedy. If you look at the affected villages, then you will see the need to build a reconciliation coexistence castle on those land. And lastly, I mentioned the healer. Kieron asked who would be the person with the best reputation. He was about to die, being injured by Hercules, and he himself treated himself. As a result of the healing, he became the best or excellent doctor. And he frequently appeared in the great literature of human race. So those who can treat himself or others can become the great healers. Jeju was suffered the most, but it will be the international city of peace. So Jeju is reborn as a healer in the world. So Jeju will be the establishment for the reconciliation and coexistence and healing. So once that is fully realized, the 43 victims in the heaven will be consoled in genuine way. So we will have to take the steps toward the life saving place. With that, I would like to conclude this session, and I would like to say thank you, the Jejuporum, to pick this topic and this closing session. And my thanks also goes to the governor and chairperson and Professor Beruni and Minister John for taking part of this session. Thank you.
Round of applause. And also thank you, our moderator. Before we officially close, Visual Thinking Writer organized this session with pictures and messages. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's all have a look. Yes, there's a lot of messages. Actually, I think the writer studied harder than anyone else. Thank you very much for your messages. Thanks to this visual thinking, what you discussed in this session, it reminds us again. So, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big hand to the writer. Thank you very much. Thank you. And this brings us to the end of this session. And also, closing ceremony will begin at 5:10 p.m. in about 30 minutes. So we kindly ask you to participate this ceremony until the end. Thank you very much.